On the morning of January 29th, 2022, a tragedy in a quiet Massachusetts town set into motion one of the most polarizing and closely watched criminal investigations in modern American history. You see, what began as a grim discovery outside a suburban home quickly fractured into a maze of conflicting theories, forensic disputes, and a nationwide debate over justice and truth. The deeper investigators looked, the stranger the circumstances became. A man was found dead in the snow. That is the stark reality that started it all. Investigators initially believed this case would be pretty straightforward, just a tragic incident in the freezing cold. But as the hours turned into days and those days into weeks, that straightforward discovery devolved into a highly complex investigation. Every rock they turned over seemed to reveal a new contradiction, transforming a local tragedy into a massive national mystery. Instead of a clear path to the truth, detectives were met with fragmented clues that seemed to tell entirely different stories. We're talking about broken pieces of a taillight scattered at the scene, pieces that would soon become the absolute center of a forensic war. Then there were cell phone records that mapped a complex digital trail, forensic evidence that defied simple explanation, and conflicting witness accounts from the very people who were there that night. The facts simply refused to align, and these shattered pieces of evidence began to divide not just a community, but the entire country. So to understand how we got here, we have to go back to the timeline of that morning, January 29th, 2022. Emergency responders arrive outside a home in Canton, Massachusetts. Right there, they discover Boston police officer John O'Keefe lying unresponsive in the winter snow. Despite desperate life-saving efforts by medical personnel, O'Keefe was later pronounced dead. Now, these are the foundational, indisputable facts of a case where honestly very little else is agreed upon. Section 1. The allegation, focusing on Karen Reed. As police worked to retrace John O'Keefe's final hours, their attention quickly shifted to the person closest to him. Investigators and prosecutors leveled a highly severe allegation against O'Keefe's girlfriend, Karen Reed. The prosecution's theory of the case is that after a night out visiting friends, Reed struck O'Keefe with her SUV while driving in reverse. They allege she then drove away, leaving him incapacitated outside in the freezing weather. And to back this up, the prosecution points to a specific combination of physical evidence from the scene, witness testimony from that night, and digital records that they claim firmly support their timeline of events. Section 2. The counter-narrative, denying the allegations. But almost immediately, a fierce pushback emerged, establishing the central conflict that would soon captivate the public. You see, Karen Reed has denied these allegations from the very beginning. Her defense team mounted an incredibly aggressive counter-narrative, arguing that law enforcement reached their conclusions far too quickly. They claim investigators suffered from tunnel vision, failing to fully examine other possibilities or even other suspects. Rather than seeing a clear-cut case, the defense pointed to deep investigative concerns. They argued that the evidence actually raises alarming questions about how the crime scene was handled, how evidence was preserved, and how the events of that fateful night were actually reconstructed by police. This stark divide ignited an absolute nationwide media frenzy. Television networks broadcasted every pretrial hearing, legal analysts debated every single motion, and social media just erupted with competing theories, dissecting every rumor and official document out there. All of it amplified one haunting question. Did the evidence explain the entire story, or were important pieces of a puzzle still missing? To try and find a clear answer, detectives built a meticulous, massive evidence board. They examined the damage to Karen Reed's SUV. They analyzed the crime scene forensics pulled right from the snow. They pulled massive amounts of cell phone data records, gathered nearby surveillance footage, conducted hours of exhaustive witness interviews, and carefully documented the severe weather conditions of that January night. Now, in a standard case, each new finding brings investigators closer to a singular truth. But this was not a standard case. What makes this investigation so highly unusual is how the exact same pieces of evidence are interpreted in starkly different ways. For the prosecution, the combined physical and digital evidence forms one consistent narrative, pointing definitively to Reed. They argue the puzzle pieces fit together perfectly. But for the defense, those exact same key findings raise serious questions. They argue that the digital evidence is completely ambiguous and supports multiple explanations, and that witness statements actually conflict with the prosecution's strict timeline. As the trial approached, every newly released court document and crime scene photograph only created more public debate. The unresolved details just continued to pile up. It forced observers to ask, Were these unexplained details merely minor inconsistencies expected in any chaotic event? Or did they constitute profound, insurmountable reasonable doubt?
Section 3. The courtroom battle, relentless scrutiny. When the case finally entered the courtroom, the theoretical debates became high-stakes legal warfare.
Under the harsh lights of the courtroom, forensic specialists and digital analysts faced intense questioning on the stand. The defense executed a highly calculated cross-examination strategy to dissect the smallest pieces of evidence. Step 1. Heavily question the initial crime scene procedures, challenging how the site was actually secured. Step 2. Examine the handling of the forensic evidence, looking for any sign of contamination or bias. And Step 3. Force the prosecution's experts to answer whether alternative explanations were ever fully considered. They challenged the very certainty of the expert interpretations. As closing arguments approached, the proceedings were anchored by the heaviest burden in the American legal system. Every defendant is presumed innocent unless proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The trial was no longer simply about presenting evidence. It was about persuading a jury which interpretation of that evidence was the most credible. Every single disputed conclusion pointed toward this incredibly high-stakes legal reality. But as the gavel prepared to fall, it became clear that this tragedy in Canton had evolved into something much larger. It sparked a broader national conversation about the complexities of modern criminal investigations. It put the absolute reliability of forensic science under a microscope. It highlighted the dangerous ambiguity in the interpretation of digital evidence. It questioned standard investigative procedures, and it showed just how incredibly difficult it is for juries to evaluate competing, highly credentialed expert opinions. For John O'Keefe's family, this has always been about seeking justice after an unimaginable loss. But for the public, observing a system where the exact same facts can tell two entirely different stories, it leaves a lingering, unsettling uncertainty. When the evidence itself remains the subject of fierce debate, can any verdict truly settle every question? Or will the Karen Read case remain one of America's most controversial criminal trials for years to come?